Today we're reviewing the Boss GX-1, an entry-level pedalboard guitar modeler released earlier this year that puts Boss firmly in the race for the entry-level market against brands like Vailton, NewX and Zoom, among others. I bought the GX-1 from Thomann with my own money and have been testing it for about a week. The GX-1 is available today on Thomann for €255, the exact price I paid, and on Sweetwater for $229. This review will be divided in 6 chapters: build quality and presentation, features, amp sounds, effects, UI and software, and lastly, price and who the pedalboard is for. Throughout this video, we'll be listening to 2 pre-recorded 30-second demo songs and 3 very short, non-processed sound bites that should help illustrate what this modeler can do. I'll leave all the info you need about each sound example on screen. Let's start with the first demo song. I'm Gui Batista, and if you enjoy this type of content, please leave a like and subscribe. It's a great way to help the channel grow, and I really appreciate your support. And also, you can get all the Boss GX-1 presets in this video for free on my Buy Me a Coffee page. The link will be in the description. Hope you like them, and back to the video. Presentation with this unit has been absolutely flawless. As per usual with Boss products, the packaging the pedalboard comes in is a high-quality cardboard with perfect presentation and great unboxing experience in general. The packaging Thomann sent with the unit was also flawless as expected. As I took the unit from the box, I found an impeccably well-built pedalboard with a very high standard of construction. This is honestly the most impressive build quality I've ever seen in a mid-tier modeler, apart from the GT1000 core. And in some aspects, I even like the build on the GX-1 a bit more. The pedal is mostly made of plastic, but all of the plastics are very sturdy, have a premium finish and don't look like plastic, if you know what I mean. The buttons on the unit are great, not the best I've tried, but well above average. They're very clicky and firm. The knobs are also high quality, although not to the same level as the great knobs on the GT1000 core. The entire pedalboard is quite small, a bit smaller than I expected, and honestly I love the form factor. It's not as small as the Tonex pedal or the GT1000 core, for example, so it won't fit on your guitar bag or case, but it's not so big or heavy that you'll have to worry about carrying it on account of its weight. It'll probably fit in most standard backpacks out there. The foot switches on the unit are good quality, no failed presses. They're not as sturdy as the GT1000 core, but they definitely wipe the floor with Tonex or Vailton. On the back of the unit, the I/O section is also pretty high quality. Great jack and power ports with no wobbling and pretty tight connections. The only thing I'm missing here is a power button, which unfortunately Boss didn't include. Instead, to power on the unit, you first need to connect your guitar jack to the input on the unit, as well as provide power to the pedalboard. You can power the unit in one of 2 ways, via a typical Boss power adapter or via batteries. So this can, in fact, be battery powered, which for me is not very interesting since I always use power adapters, but I'm sure some players will find a lot of use from this function. The GX-1 also has a really good color screen that has great viewing angles, a decent size, and in general great visibility over your signal chain. To recap, the build quality on the GX-1 is impressive, especially for how low Boss priced it. Great components, great presentation, and a very usable footprint. The GX-1 does pretty much everything every other full modeler does. There's a big number of amps on board, almost as much as the GT1000 core with a few omissions, pretty much every effect type you can imagine, with a few variations per effect type and a lot of flexibility for live playing. One of the things this unit sadly doesn't include are bass amps and pedals. It seems like this time Boss decided to split their offerings in two units, the regular GX-1 and the second version called the GX-1B for bass. Not sure what their reasoning was for this, but unfortunately if you're a guitar player who also plays bass from time to time, this one won't do it. The main reason that made me so happy while testing this pedalboard was the fact that the screen, the menus and the whole interface have been restructured and remade from the ground up when compared with the GT1000 units. I've been using the GT1000 core for about 3 years and I still don't like the interface. It's grown on me over time and I kinda got used to it, but when I first started the GX-1, I immediately felt like this was a major upgrade over the GT1000. The color screen looks great and you can clearly see the entire effects chain laid out with the color buttons. It's a very neat and tactile way to look at your signal chain instantly without having to rely on touch interfaces. Personally, I will always prefer actual buttons and knobs to touch screens. In terms of patch switching, it's important to say that to achieve gapless switches between patches, you'll need to keep all your effects in the same order between patches, and the same thing goes for delay and reverb tails. So the unit can indeed do gapless switches and tails, but there are some limitations. In my opinion, this isn't a big deal at all, just something to consider when building your signal chains for live playing. In the I/O department, the unit's very simple. It includes all the necessary stuff and keeps out all the bells and whistles like MIDI connections. There's an input, a pair of outputs for stereo, a headphone out, an additional expression pedal input for additional control, and the USB-C port to connect the unit to a computer. All the basics are covered very tastefully. There's an internal looper for those who want it and also a tuner. And I have to praise the tuner on this unit, because thanks to the great color screen and the high accuracy of the tuner, this unit is absolutely good enough to use on stage, no external tuner necessary. And that's not something you can say about many units at this price point, if any. To recap, in terms of features, the GX-1 has everything I could ever need. A vast array of amps, every effect I can think of, a great and super usable interface, a great tuner, a great screen, a very specific footprint that's not too big or too small, and a good quality expression pedal. There's some things missing when compared to other units, but we'll get there in the next chapters. Amp sounds in the GX-1 are very interesting. I was not sure what to expect of the GX-1, especially coming from years with the GT1000 core. I was expecting this to be a budget unit with budget amp models, however, I found something quite unique. The amp models in the GX-1 seem to be almost exactly the same as the ones on the GT1000 line, with a few omissions and a few slight variations in the naming schemes. But other than that, these seem to be, on the surface, exactly the same models. However, these amp models don't sound exactly the same as the ones on the GT1000 core. Funny enough, some models sound marginally better on the GT1000, while others sound better on the GX-1, which is something that surprised me a lot. I was expecting that the GT1000 would sound better than the GX-1 in every instance, and that's not the case. The GX-1 seems to have a more balanced EQ profile in general than the GT1000 core, since all the amps seem to be slightly more bassy and even feel a tad more realistic in some cases. The GT1000 core has a more lean sound profile in general, with less bass and more treble, but there seems to be a bit more detail and texture in the amp models and effects in general. Now, I don't want to compare the GX-1 too much to the GT1000 for now, since that comparison is coming in my next video. Feel free to subscribe if you want to see that. So let's instead talk about the amp sounds in this unit in the context of its price point. First off, there's a great variety of amps, Some of them are original amp models created by Boss that aren't particularly inspired in any specific real amp, such as the Boutique, the Transparent or the Natural. But then there's a few that are actually based on real amps, like the Deluxe and others. The variety of amps here is pretty big, and you can cover anything you want from jazz to death metal and everything in between. The amp models are very good and real sounding, but if you pair them with high quality external IRs, you'll probably have better results than using the stock cabs. At least that's been my experience. To recap, the GX-1 has a great variety of amps, most of which are extremely good for its price point and strangely, in some instances, sound even better than the same models on the GT1000 core. You'll also most likely get better results while using external IRs rather than stock cabs. The GX-1's amp models can play any music style and are good enough for professional studio and live music settings. Boss effects are legendary, and the GX-1 lives up to its name. There's no unit I've seen at this price point, or frankly any price point until the GT1000 core, that can compete with the GX-1 in the sheer quality of the effects. This to me has been the most crucial thing about Boss modelers. You might say Tonex amps sound better, sure, maybe Line 6's design and UI are simpler, but Boss's effects for me have been unbeatable so far. And just to be clear, I'm not making comparisons to high-end single-use pedals like Strymon or high-end modelers like the Quad Cortex. I'm merely referring to what's available at the entry-level and mid-tier price points for all-in-one modeling solutions. And in that camp, the GX-1 certainly takes the prize when it comes to effects. Pretty much every effect type I can think of is included with this pedal board. You can use the expression pedal as volume, pitch, or to modulate other effects such as chorus. There's 3 main effect slots called Effects 1, Effects 2 and Effects 3, and their position can be changed freely. On top of this, there's also delay and reverb and noise gates, which means you can add a lot of effects on a single patch. But we'll discuss the DSP aspects of this unit in the next chapter a bit more in depth. Compared to the GT1000, the variety of effects is smaller and the amount of parameters you can change in each effect is also smaller. But even then, the GX-1 includes pretty much anything I could need. Compressors, overdrives, delays and reverbs all sound fantastic and very realistic. It's very easy to create workhorse type of signal chains with the most common tools for us guitar players, such as tube screamers, plate reverbs or analog delays. For less than $300, I don't think there's anything missing in this unit in terms of effects. This is the category in which Boss has stepped up the most. For years, online discourse around Boss has always somewhat involved the idea that their modelers are excessively difficult to use when compared to other brands. And that's the exact experience I've had as well. The GT1000 core, while being an excellent product, has proved to have a pretty awful interface when compared to other units. Luckily, Boss stepped up and solved this issue completely with the GX-1. This unit, while feeling unmistakably like a Boss product, has one of the most user-friendly and approachable UIs I've ever seen. The menus are simple and clear to use, the buttons are clearly labeled and do exactly what they're supposed to, and you can even see your current patch's signal chain reflected on the buttons, which is extremely useful. You can also turn effects on or off by simply pressing said buttons. In terms of DSP, Boss's approach to this unit has been very simple and very effective. This unit has nowhere near the same horsepower as the GT1000 units, and to deal with this fact, Boss made it so that the pedal always has the same number of blocks on each patch. 3 effects blocks, an amp block that includes DIR, a delay block, a reverb block, an overdrive block, and an expression pedal effects block. So in essence, you can have all those working simultaneously, but you can't add more than that to the signal chain. In my experience with the unit, I've never felt like I needed more effects working simultaneously, but I'm not someone who works with exceptionally complicated signal chains. So depending on your preferences, your mileage may vary. Another result of Boss forcing the signal chain to a reduced number of blocks is that the unit feels extremely simple to use. Each patch has 8 blocks, you choose which ones are on and off, you save the patch and you're done. no messing around with menus, no reorganizing complicated effects chains. Sometimes having restrictions helps creating more user-friendly products. In the notes on gapless preset switching, as I said before, gapless switching is perfectly possible on the GX1, but Boss warns in the user manual that in order to make preset switches gapless, you'll need to have the same exact signal chain on both presets, meaning the same amp, the same cab and the same effects. You can of course turn some of the blocks on or off, but you can't, for example, use a different amp and still get gapless switching. The same thing applies to reverb and delay tails, which Boss calls carryover. This of course introduces some limitations to what you can do, but since gapless is most important in live settings, I don't personally see this as a problem, since I would only ever use one signal chain per show. But again, depending on your preferences, this may not be ideal for you. And as for software, you can download the great Boss Tone Studio for both desktop and mobile, and you can connect the unit to your computer via USB-C or to your phone via Bluetooth. I tried both and they both work perfectly well. I personally prefer to use the desktop app, as I like to keep my work-related stuff on my computer rather than my phone. And the computer app is a bit more usable because of the bigger screen, the mouse, and the fact that I have my external IR stored on my hard drive. So who is this pedalboard for? If you have $250 to spend on a modeler and you want the best one available, this is definitely a contender. While the amp models are not as realistic as the more affordable Tone X1, the amount and quality of the effects in the GX1 is untouched at this price range. There's a lot of high quality offerings from Chinese brands such as NUX and Vailton, but the GX1 has the Boss name attached to it, which brings a gigantic seal of approval from one of the most legendary brands in guitar history. The GX1 is a fantastic unit for both newbies and professionals alike. The amps and the effects all sound great and can be used in professional recordings and shows with little effort. For new players who may want to spend less, I think the GX1 is a great first modeler because it's a complete product that's easy to use and can pretty much last forever. There's zero online dependency, it works fully out of the box without ever needing to connect to a computer, and it's easy to use and to understand. If you're a beginner and are considering your first all-in-one solution, the GX1 is a great option and it could last you for the rest of your career if you want to. On the other hand, if you're a seasoned pro and looking for something simple, dependable and very complete, the GX1 is also a great option. It's not as powerful as the GT1000 or as realistic as the Tone X, but what it lacks in power and flexibility, it makes up in simplicity and ease of use. So is this an endgame modeler? Not really. It's not something that can replace a Kemper or an Axe FX. The sound quality is not there, the realism is not there, and the flexibility is also not there. But if you don't need the absolute best the market has to offer, the GX1 could be your only guitar device and you'd be able to do pretty much anything. Guys, if you enjoyed the video, please subscribe, and up next you can watch my reviews of the GT1000 Core and Tone X pedal, which I'll be comparing to the GX1 in my next videos. Make sure to subscribe to get notified when those videos come out. Anyway, thanks for watching, I'll see you next time.